Welcome to the Bucky Brooks Show. I am Bucky Brooks, and in the side box, my man from PFF, Dalton Wasserman. What's going on, Dalton? What's happening?
Not much. As always, a quiet day in the NFL, isn't it, Bucky?
Yeah, quiet day indeed. I mean, let's just get to it. The LA Rams trading for Trent McDuffie. The Rams have notoriously been one to be like F them picks. What do you think about this? This was not on the rundown. I was not thinking about it, but it came across the scroll. So what do you think about Trent McDuffie going to the LA Rams?
Honestly, I love this trade on both sides. I think you start with the Rams, and their biggest weakness, especially late in the year, was the secondary. That was really the reason they didn't get to and possibly win the Super Bowl, right? They kind of patched it together early in the season with some veteran guys and kind of just, an amalgamation of just different veteran players from other places. But to get McDuffie to have another true star now in this secondary, you can really start, especially his versatility, outside, inside, you can really start to build around him. He's going to be the core piece of it now. They've got some other free agents like Kobe Durant and Cam Curl that they're either going to have to figure out how to retain or to replace, whether it's in this draft or in free agency. But this is a great building block for them. And you talk about attacking your biggest weakness and really preemptively getting out ahead of it. I think it's awesome. Then from the Chiefs angle, look, you get the 29th overall pick in this draft. You get several other draft picks to work with. It sounded like they weren't going to extend McDuffie anyway. I think it's a fair trade. And I think the one bonus here for the Rams as well is it was that 29th pick, and they can still pick at 13 if, let's say, just for the sake of positional value, Caleb Downs fell to them at 13, I would have no hesitation taking him. If they wanted to take another corner like a Mansoor Delane or somebody like that, no hesitation when it comes to improving this secondary. The Rams are attacking their biggest weakness right now.
You know, what I love about this is it comes on the heels of going to the combine. And one of the things that I like about the Rams and forward-thinking organizations, even though their brass wasn't there, they had a chance to have their scouts with boots on the ground. And so they had a chance to really assess this cornerback class, and then they could come back, reconvene, and make a decision. Hey, who's out there? What do we like in the first round? All of us have mocked a corner to them in the first round at some point, and I felt like this is them weighing what is available in the draft class versus what is available to them via free agency or the trade, and they made the move to get a proven commodity, knowing that even at 13, they could double down and spend big money on the trade when they re-sign Trent McDuffie, but also bring a first-round pick. What do you think about this year's quarterback class?
I honestly think there's two guys that obviously separate themselves from the pack. I think obviously Fernando Mendoza is going to go first overall. I think he's the most ready.
I'm sorry, I meant not quarterback. I meant cornerback class.
I think, look, Mansoor Delane from LSU is coming off just an outstanding season. I believe he only allowed 14 catches as the primary defender in coverage down there for one of the best secondaries in college football. Jermod McCoy is super talented, and you have Avion Terrell also from Clemson. I think those are pretty solidly the top three guys. And then I think there's a lot of intriguing borderline day one or solidly early to mid day two type of guys when you talk about Brandon Cisse from South Carolina, Keith Abney from Arizona State, right? I love D'Angelo Pons from Indiana. He's been one of my favorite players even since he was at James Madison his true freshman year. If he was 3 inches taller, I think he'd be in the conversation as CB1 in this class. He's so technically sound, and he showed off his athleticism at the combine. And then you've even got some good nickel options like a Keontae Scott from Miami. So I do think there's some good depth. I do think Delane, McCoy, and Terrell stand out as the top three. But even if the Rams wanted to attack that position again on day two, they'd be fully equipped to do so.
Yeah, this was so interesting about that, right? So McCoy is the guy that a lot of people talk about, either CB1 or CB2, but he didn't play at all last season. So there's some uncertainty about who he's going to be when he shows up. His pro day is critical because he didn't work out at the combine. And so when I see him, 6 foot, 193 pounds, great ball hawk, great skills and those things, but man, a year away from the game, you just leaves you wondering. And then I see Delane, who is instinctive, aware. I think he has a versatile toolbox where he can kind of play press, he can play off, man zone, all those things. And finally, with Avion Terrell, didn't run, but when you watched him in drills, not many guys that are as smooth or as fluid as he is. And then having the bloodlines with his brother being in, I do believe the first round class is talented, but then I just think bird in hand with Trent McDuffie, it is hard to bypass a guy who is a proven all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber player. To me, it's just the Rams being able to assess it and make an evaluation based on, hey, man, like, we're trying to go again. We got Matthew Stafford right here in the twilight of his career. Let's get a proven commodity while also thinking about bringing somebody else on.
Absolutely true. And I think that's the part of the trade that I love with them giving up the 29th overall pick instead of the 13th, right? Because the 13th, I mean, that's still a premium pick. That's heavy. But, I'm kind of agreeing with it. If they feel like there is not a player that they could get at 29 who is equal to or better than McDuffie, then just like you mentioned, go get the proven commodity right now, right? And we know he's scheme versatile. We know he can play inside and out. And again, it's taking advantage of the window that they have, right? Matthew Stafford's in his late 30s. He might only have 1 or 2 more years left. But when you talk about the opportunity in front of them, and I think they can feel just how close they were to going to and winning a Super Bowl. You could argue they were, 4 yards from it, down with that last fourth down stop Seattle made. When you're that close, you want to get over the hump, right? And now you've got some changes even in Seattle, the defending champions, losing Clint Kubiak. They got some free agents of their own. So the opportunity is right there in front of the Rams, and I love the idea of jumping on it. And again, the core of the package being just that 29th pick instead of number 13.
Yeah, no, it's great. So we go to FanDuel Sportsbook. We look at the odds plus 700 now for the LA Rams. Ahead of your defending Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks are sitting at plus 750. I love this conversation, and I love how we're going to spin it, because a lot of people have begun to talk about, hey, the LA Rams with that second pick, maybe they were going to use it on a quarterback. I asked you earlier inadvertently about the quarterbacks. What do you think about this quarterback class, Fernando, Mendoza, Ty Simpson, and the rest?
So I think there is a pretty big gap between those two guys and the rest of the group, right? When you talk about Garrett Nussmeier and Drew Aller and Carson Beck and all those guys, I think that's closer to at least a third-round conversation, if not later. Mendoza's going to go first. I do believe he's the best one. The accuracy is there. Him measuring it at 236 pounds at the combine, I'll be honest, was pretty surprising. You talk about the frame that he has. I think he's got probably roughly a B-plus arm when it comes to velo and things like that. And he's a better athlete than he's given credit for. I think he's a well-deserved number 1 pick. And Simpson is obviously the most intriguing guy. Now, me personally, I think Ty Simpson has a lot of potential. I think he can be a solid starter. I would prefer to see him go somewhere where he can sit for at least a year, say like the Rams or like even the Pittsburgh Steelers if Aaron Rodgers comes back. I think he just needs a little bit better, more consistent footwork. And you talk about a pressure plan, right? I think that's what he really struggled with the second half of this year, was when teams started really bringing the heat and blitzing him, how did he respond to it, right? He's a decent athlete, but he's not always going to beat pressure with his legs. So I don't love the idea of, say, him going 16 or so to the New York Jets, where he might have to start right now. But if he got to sit a year, and especially his background as a coach's son, I think he could be really good down the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to counter back both things. So Fernando Mendoza, I'm glad that you said about the B-plus arm talent. I think some of that has been lost in the conversation because he's so much head and shoulders above the rest of the guys in the class. There's kind of been this mythical creation that we made Fernando Mendoza in terms of what he is as a potential number 1. If we look at him against past classes, I don't think he would stack up as the number 1 with the Caleb Williams, a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May, some of the other guys that recently have been the number 1 overall pick. He wouldn't do that. But in this class, it's clear and apparent that he is the number 1. I love what you brought up about his athleticism. That is something, when you go back and watch him at Cal, underrated part of the game. In fact, I don't think Indiana fully tapped into his RPO ability, his ability to run and make things on the move. That is something that would be beneficial for Clint Kubiak as they do the bootleg and movement stuff under center. So overall, I'm fine with him going to the Raiders, because now that they had a coach, seeing where he's going, I felt like system was going to be really big. People have made the comparison. I made a comparison. Jared Goff, someone that said like Daniel Jones. I do think his game fits what Clint Kubiak wants to do. The bigger question is Ty Simpson. I like what I saw briefly, but man, we talk about only 15 career starts, and we talk about the limited sample size and how that has negatively impacted so many quarterbacks that we've seen. Anthony Richardson, Mitchell Trubisky, going back to Ryan Tannehill, Trey Lance. We haven't seen that many guys with such a short sample size succeed. What gives you confidence that he is going to be the outlier that makes it happen?
I think he can see the field very well. That's the first thing for me. Again, growing up as a coach's son, his dad's the head coach at UT Martin over there. And I just think you can see in his process that he can see the field very well, especially over the middle of the field. For probably 3/4 of this past season, he was one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the country, throwing between the hash marks, right? And that's an area that NFL teams are attacking so often now. And he can throw with anticipation and with vision. I think he understands what he's looking at, especially when sets are clean, right? And and it's a 4-man rush and things are pretty basic in front of him. I think there's just times when, the two best examples to me of the struggles and then even the improvement are the 2 Oklahoma games and facing that Brent Venables defense that throws every look at you, all the blitzes and simulated pressures and things like that. The first game, it felt like he could just never get his eyes adjusted post snap. And even for the first quarter and a half of the playoff game, couldn't quite. And then he started finding it. He started finding the right hots, the right rotations, the right second and third reads. That gives me encouragement that I think Simpson mentally can handle the NFL game. He's got average size. I would say his arm, I think his arm is a little bit better, at least when his feet are set, than people give him credit for. And when he's really in a rhythm and he throws with anticipation, especially over the middle, he's really solid. He gets kind of hot and cold. It's like when he feels it, he's really feeling it. And I think, again, it's just that adjustment of continuing to improve and continuing to get those reps and seeing, because he wants to throw with anticipation. He wants to throw on that third step with one hitch or on that fifth step with one hitch. It's just a matter of when he's sped up at NFL speed, can he handle that? Will he have enough answers for that, especially when it comes to pre-snap reads?
I got to ask you, who's QB3 for you?
I have Garrett Nussmeier. Now, had he not gotten the injunction or whatever it is to go back to Ole Miss, I would have had Trinidad Chambliss. I had him third, but taking him off the board. I have Garrett Nussmeier. I think similar to Simpson, mentally he understands the game as Doug Nussmeier's son. And we've seen this year, it was clear that he wasn't right. The oblique injury, getting hit behind a struggling offensive line at LSU. The arm just didn't even look the same as it did in 2024. I think he's got a better arm than he showed this past year, and you're not doing him any justice if you're not watching the 2024 tape, right? So I think Nussmeier, for me, QB3, probably something like a third, probably gets out, I think, to me in the third round. I think the physical tools are average to maybe slightly above average. He's not the best athlete. He's not going to add a ton to your run game. But again, the ability to throw with anticipation, and he's a gunslinger. He's not afraid to throw it into some of those tighter windows, especially down the field. So I do think he's an intriguing maybe 2 to 3 year backup type who you can develop behind the scenes and just get him healthy, right? Get him healthy, get his confidence back, because you could see even his confidence was a little bit shaken in 25.
Yeah, it's funny because we have those guys potentially flip. I think I just may have preferred Carson Beck as QB3, and there's nothing that stands out. I feel like coming off the heels of Tyler Shutt having some success at the end of the year, I think people are going to be chasing, hey, who's that second round or third round player that in the right environment he can pop? And it comes down to Nussmeier, who you talk about, ironically, dad is OC for the Saints, but he has a lot of success at LSU, son of a coach. He understands processing, all of that other stuff, but you talk about average tools. And then I'll counter with Carson Beck, experienced player, older player, has played a ton of football. You would say that, look, his tools are average, even though he has like prototypical size and those things. I think the big thing about Carson Beck is, man, like he is a managerial type and he gets in trouble when he tries to do too much. When he steps outside of his box, that's when the bad things happen. And so I just wonder, when people are weighing the pros and cons of Carson Beck and Nussmeier, who do offensive coordinators and quarterback coaches feel most comfortable with as they think about one being a developmental guy with QB1 potential?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You're absolutely right on Beck. I think that my favorite thing about Carson Beck is that he understands, A, for the most part, his limitations, and B, his role in an offense, right? I think when he's protected and his feet are set, he's accurate. He, like you mentioned, he can manage the game very well, especially to the chains. And I do wonder how much his arm strength was a bit limited, playing at Miami so soon after the elbow surgery that ended his Georgia career. I do wonder if there's more, in the mechanics and even just in his strength in his arm that can come back, right? Because you could see this year a little bit diminished, especially on the deep ball, especially when he didn't get his feet set. But you talk about a guy who sees the field quickly. The last 3 years, he's had one of the fastest average time to throw marks in the country. He's a quick processor and he's accurate. The thing with Beck for me is there's a real lack of athleticism, right? Like even when we watch statue guys now, like even Jared Goff in his current form and guys like that, Beck is not going to move very much at all. I think even Nussmeier is a better athlete than Beck, and he can create outside of the pocket a little bit more. Beck, it's pretty stagnant. So if he goes to a team with plus pass protection and he has the space to stand back there and just process with his eyes clean back there, I think he can be at least a solid backup and maybe even a low-end starter, a guy with potential. But that lack of athleticism is something that really, I think, unless the offensive line is really, really clean in front of him, that can limit him a little bit.
So we can go from the most important position in the game to maybe the most undervalued position in the game, and that's running back. Jeremiyah Love puts on a show at the Combine, following the heels of 2 spectacular seasons at Notre Dame, where he's been well over 1,000 yards and shows everything that you want to see. But when you see a guy at his size, he came in at 212 pounds, run a 4.37 on top of what you saw from tape. Where would you rank him in terms of as a top 5 prospect in this draft class?
Oh, I think he is the best offensive player in this draft class. I think you've got some other, obviously a couple of receivers there, and even Fernando Mendoza. I understand the positional value, but I think Love, I understand the arguments of where we're comparing him, to say Ashton Ginty last year, or even some of these other elite prospects we've had recently, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, those guys. I think he is at least in that class, and we could argue where he's ranked among those guys. I think he's the best offensive player. I think you could argue he is the best player overall in this draft. And there's some really good candidates. I absolutely love Caleb Downs. We can get into that on the safety position value too. But I think you could argue he's the best player in this class. And, obviously if quarterbacks weren't what they were, and, the New York Jets tagging Brees Hall, they have some other needs. But it wouldn't shock me to see Love go as high as 3rd overall with as talented as he is. He's unbelievable on the home run speed. I'll tell you, I was there when he had that 98-yard run against Indiana a couple of years ago in the playoffs. Yeah. You just don't see that. There's good players, and then there's players who aren't normal. Jeremiyah Love's not normal, right? That's just a special, special talent who can hit a home run and strike fear into a defense on any play.
Well, look, man, I got to go because you kind of let it leak, let the cat out of the bag about your guy Caleb Downs. So if Jeremiyah Love is your top offensive player, Caleb Downs, who you appear to have a little draft crush on, where would he rank on the list of defensive leaders? He's number 1 for you?
I think he's number 1. And look, I understand Arvell Reese is a freak. Sonny Styles is a freak. I love Reuben Bain and David Bailey and the years and the careers that they've had as well. But Caleb Downs, I've watched this guy for 3 years in a Nick Saban defense, in a Jim Knowles defense, in a Matt Patricia NFL-style defense. And in all 3 of them, he was really the centerpiece of it. And I know he's not built like Kyle Hamilton or Derwin James or any of that, but his football IQ stood out even back at Alabama. Nick Saban does not start true freshmen. That's not a thing, and not in the secondary for sure. He does not do that, but you could just see it's just like, okay, he's got maybe average size for the position, but he's so ahead of it, and his eyes are so good, his vision is so good, and he's always where he needs to be. And then he gets in these Ohio State defenses, and he just plays in every role they need him to. If it's a deep half, if it's single high, if it's kind of as the rat or the robber in the middle of the field. I mean, essentially during their national title run, he was extended about 8-9 yards back, but he was basically their middle linebacker during that run, and the structure of the whole defense was built around him. When I think about guys, when you think about great linebackers or great safeties in the middle, where you go, man, we can build the whole structure of our defense around this guy because of his intelligence and his physicality and everything he brings, that's a special football player. So look, he may not go top 5. He might get dropped down because he's not built like Hamilton or Derwin. And, he might not, teams might just not see a special physical build, but somebody's getting an absolute gem, and Caleb Downs is going to be a leader of their defense.
Here's what's funny about it, right? So people talk about the Kyle Hamilton, the Derwin James type guys. And I would say that both of those guys were underdrafted. And people have come back and be like, oh my God, like they're playing so great. But when you looked at the tape, I think there were people that thought Kyle Hamilton was one of the top 3 players in the draft class when he came out. And there was a lot of buzz around Derwin James, but people let positional value get in the way. And Caleb Downs, I feel like because he's so good and he's so solid in all the areas, I don't believe he's getting his just due in terms of what he's been able to do. In a draft in which we're raving about Arvell Reese and we're talking about Sonny Styles, and everyone is falling over themselves to praise those guys as dominant, dynamic players, Caleb Downs was the one that Matt Patricia said was the coach on the field. So I just can't understand why we're undervaluing a player who has been rock solid in 3 different systems for 3 different coaches that we know ask a lot of their top players.
Yeah, I think it's the positional value part, and where all the analytics have taken us to, where obviously quarterback is the most important position. But when you think about wide receiver, offensive tackle, defensive end, cornerback, I think there has been a part of the game that was a little bit lost here for a few years. And I think these last 2 years, it's making a comeback. I think you look at Philadelphia's defense last year and what they had, being able to play too high and then having great linebackers in front of it that could keep them in that structure and building that defensive tackle. You look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl this year, building at defensive tackle, two of the best interior pass rushes, and then how good Seattle was at that linebacker and safety level, and Miki Minwari kind of being in between there. The value there, it's still there, right? And now I'm telling you right now, we're about to see it in the free agent market with this interior offensive line class, guys like Tyler Linderbaum, and that the middle of both your offense and your defense, they've got to be sound, right? It's great to have the skill players and obviously the premium positions out there, but you still got to be great elsewhere. You're going to get exposed in the middle of your defense, especially this draft. This is where D tackles and linebackers and safeties are going to come back into vogue, because the Eagles and Seahawks have shown the last 2 years that it can work and it can win a championship.
You know, it's funny, when I played for the late Dick Duran, he always talked about in every sport, to be a championship team, you got to be strong down the middle. You think about the defenses, defensive tackle, Mike, linebacker, safety. In football, this still matters. And I know we've talked about premium positions, but it's hard for me not to put those positions as marquee or premium spots because it's so important. But because we were talking about Downs, I got to ask you about his teammates. And I saw stock up. We talked about Arvell, Reese, and Sonny Styles both showing up and showing out at the combine. Tell me what you liked about both of those guys. Not only what you saw in Indy, but what you've seen on tape.
I mean, both of them, the big thing that stands out, athletic freaks, man. I mean, you talk about Sonny Styles as a former safety, coming down, dropping down and playing linebacker, being the main coverage guy, especially next to Cody Simon during that national title run, really in his first full year playing linebacker. You just don't get guys built like that, especially not at that position, 6'5" and 240-something pounds, and then can run 4.4s like that, right? So I think Styles, the one thing to me he got so much better with this year was being even more physical in the box. His block shedding to me this year was unreal. He could always play to the football, but his ability to get off of offensive linemen and tight ends and get to the ball through them has gotten a lot better. And then Reese, in the same vein, just get a freak athlete that can really run, man. Our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, has really comped him as a linebacker for now, at least, to somebody like Edger and Cooper, who just has the combination of speed and instincts to constantly get to the football. I don't think he's quite as polished in coverage as Styles, but also that may not be as big of a question if you like his pass rush and what he can bring off the edge. So he's going to be the interesting one athletically, but they're both freaks of nature, man. And honestly, from what we've seen on tape and then what we just saw at the combine, I'd have a hard time believing either one of them gets outside the top 7 in this class. Yeah,
both guys are great, but I got to ask you, so David Bailey was also kind of creating the buzz in the combine, and maybe some of his performance was overshadowed by the Ohio State standouts. What did you feel about Bailey before the combine, and how do you feel about him now that the combine is done?
Oh, I still think a guy that should go in the top 5 potentially, and I still think so. I think you talk about the New York Jets at 2, the Cardinals at 3, the Tennessee Titans at 4. I think Robert Saleh would love him with the explosiveness as a wide 9 he could bring off the edge. David Bailey, in each of the last 2 years, has led the nation in PFF pass rush grade. That's even at Stanford when he really had no help at all, and then he was playing on arguably the best D-line in college football at Texas Tech, and he took further advantage of that. I mean, you just see the explosiveness, the off, the first step off the ball, the ability to turn the corner, and then just add in the moves to go along with it. I mean, he is unbelievable. I know he's not quite as stout against the run as, say, a Ruben Bain is, but he improved this year, right? An 80 PFF run defense grade this year is something that is nothing to sneeze at. Certainly, if he were to put anything close to that up in the NFL, he'd be one of the elite players. But I think if you're a team like the Jets, who obviously have an edge need, or the Tennessee Titans, who have a need off the edge with a pass rusher, I don't know why you wouldn't think about this guy with the explosiveness off the edge that he's shown you the last 2 years on tape.
Yeah, he's a dominant player. He is fantastic. And so when we talk about pass rushers, that means we have to talk about pass protectors on the premium. And what's interesting about this class, right tackles over top of left tackles, the guys that we're talking at the top of the board, Francis Mauigoa, Spencer Fernando, they're right tackles. And then on the other side, you have Caleb Lemieux. You have some other guys, Monroe Freeling. You have Blake Miller. What's your general take on this offensive tackle class? How many do you think maybe get into the first round?
I think you're going to get, let's see, we're just going tackles. I think Mauigoa, Fano, if either of them are going to play tackle, that's going to be a question. I think Mauigoa at this point is more likely. I still think Caden Proctor is a factor in that as well. I think the weight is something to monitor. 352 that he weighed in at the combine. I think that might be right on the border of tackle or guard there. That's the funny part, is you've got all these top guys who it's like, Are they moving to the interior, or are they going to be tackles? But then I look at those three as first-round prospects, and then you look at Freeling, Lomu, and Blake Miller possibly. I think he's another guy. He's a right tackle, but he's very ready to start right now. I think we get at least 6 plus possibly 2 more interior guys. I love Venga Ioane as well. But that's the question is you mentioned it. You don't have a ton of guys who are experienced left tackles, right? Like I do think Mauigoa, even as high as 3rd overall, makes sense for the Cardinals because they can plug and play him at right tackle, right?
Yeah.
What do teams think of Proctor, inside or outside? What do the teams think of Fano? I mean, he was so good at Utah for the last few years at right tackle, but does the length move him inside and then make him an option for a team like Detroit or the Chargers at guard, somebody like that? So I think there are, when it comes to how many tackles, I would probably say 6, with the variable of how many of them are actually staying there. Like Freeling, Lomu, Miller, I feel really good about staying. The other 3, I would like them to stay, but I understand that there's options and there's teams with different needs and some different flexibilities there.
All right, so I'm going to do this on the way out. We all do this over the course of the evaluation season. We have a guy that becomes like our draft crush, our guy that we are on and no one can get us off of him. Who is that draft crush for you?
All right, I'm going to stay on the defensive side, and I think a guy who also at the Combine solidified a first-round pick, and I've loved him since his true freshman year at Purdue. Dillon Thieneman's my guy. I'm telling you right now, I love Caleb Downs, might be the best player in the draft, but it's not that big a drop-off from Dillon Thieneman, and that's more about how good Thieneman is. You talk about his true freshman year at Purdue. I thought he was the best single-high safety in the country. As a true freshman, the range was unreal. Changed roles a little bit. Ryan Walters had him playing in the box a little bit more. Had success, but was getting used to it, and then everything he did for Oregon back there as really the leader of their secondary this past year. Thieneman's an unbelievable player. The speed pops, I'm telling you right, that 4.35 that he ran, that is real on the football field. He's aggressive enough to play in the box. He's fast enough to play back there in single high. Somebody in the top 20 to 25 needs to take this guy. He will change your secondary in a similar way to how Caleb Downs will as well.
You know, it's funny, man, because we share that because I love him. I loved him when I watched him on tape, particularly the Purdue tape. It's rare that someone can lead the team in interceptions with 6 as a freshman. The next year, lead the team in tackles, playing in the box, transfer to Oregon, play kind of a star role and shine in that. To me, when we think about 3 safety defenses and how you have to play that triangle, he is uniquely qualified to do it. And people talk about Caleb Downs, but man, I am buzzing on Thieneman, and I was buzzing on him before he laid down the 4.35 at the Combine. But now I'm right there with you. I love him. I can't wait to see where he goes. More importantly, what kind of impact he makes at the next level. I got to tell you, John, this is fun, man. This was fun going back and forth. I got to have you come back on because I know there's so much more that you can share when it comes to the 2026 draft. And so maybe in a couple of weeks, we bring you back and let you brew on some of the other things that you got buzzing.
Absolutely, Bucky. Let me know anytime.
Hey, man, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for joining the Bucky Brooks Show. Guys, this was great. We talked about the 2026 Combine and the draft. Join us next week when we talk more about free agency.